So, confronting the fact of our own death is difficult. It's a bitter pill to swallow because it has great philosophical significance here. Now, of course, a lot of people have an answer, right, to that question. They say, yes, of course, maybe you're right. If life were mortal, if the fact were that all we did was have sex and ate some food and slept a lot and then died after 77 years or so, that would be kind of pointless, just like the cicadas. But human beings are not like that because humans are different. Humans have a soul, and that soul, upon bodily death, can separate from the body, and it can go off to heaven, hopefully, and have an immortal life of bliss and happiness with a reunion of all things good in God in heaven. And so the traditional answer, or at least one traditional answer to the mortality of human life and the ensuing meaningless, is to say that life is made meaningful because we are immortal beings, and where we actually find the meaning of human life is in the afterlife. And this is where Camus goes to work with the myth of Sisyphus, because what he is asking us to reflect upon is more deeply what it is, if anything, that would make an immortal life any more meaningful than a mortal life. Because after all, if we go back to the myth of Sisyphus, Sisyphus is now immortal, but he is condemned to all eternity to rolling a boulder up a hill, and to most of us that sounds like not a life that is worth living, or a mode of being that is worth living. So Sisyphus rather is immortal, but he does not have a meaningful life. So it's not mortality or immortality per se that is the thing that makes a life meaningful, right, or not. I'm often reminded right at this point in thinking about existentialist theme of Mark Twain, or a story from Mark Twain. Now, Twain was not an existentialist, and I'm going to take some liberties with his story here, but it makes a point that is directly relevant to this existentialist issue here. The story I have in mind is called Extract from Captain Stormfield's Visit to Heaven. Captain Stormfield is an ex-military guy, kind of hard-drinking, hard-living kind of guy. And one day or morning rather, he wakes up and he finds himself in unusual surroundings, apparently surrounded by clouds somewhere in a very long line. And so he's a little bit disoriented, and he starts asking the other people in line, what's going on here? And they inform him that they have died and he has died, and everybody is in line waiting to get up to the pearly gates where a sentence will be pronounced, whether they're going to go to heaven or whether they're going to go to hell. And so forth, the usual story. Now, Captain Stormfield is immediately blusteringly angry because he's quite sure that a mistake has made. It was not his time to die. And all through this long line of waiting to get up to the pearly gates, he's making it clear that a mistake has been made, right, and so forth. And then sure enough, he gets up to the front of the line and he's talking to St. Peter, and St. Peter is going through the roll book, seeing whether people are going to be assigned to heaven or hell. And can't find Captain Stormfield's name on the list, so some sort of a mistake has been made. St. Peter says, well, I'm going to have to go off and do some checking here to see what goes on, and he gives Captain Stormfield a pass, temporary pass to get into heaven, while St. Peter goes off and sorts out what the issue is. So Captain Stormfield gets into heaven, immediately finds himself in another very long line, and after days, after weeks, and so forth, he gets to the front of the line, and he gets his harp. So he now has his harp, and then he's told to get in this other line over here, very long wait. At the end of that line, he gets his wings. Right? And then he gets into another line, very long wait, long wait, long wait, blah, 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 blah. End of that line, finally gets to the front of that line. It's cloud assignment. He's assigned to a cloud, and there he is. He's in heaven. He's got his wings, he's got his harp, he's on his cloud. Other people are in heaven, they're on their clouds with their harps, with their wings. And he starts playing some harp music, and everything is very lovely. He plays some more harp music, and he plays some more harp music. And after a while, harp music's starting to get a little bit old here. And so he knows around everybody else is playing their harp music. This goes on for time. And then sooner or later, a question starts to creep into his mind, which is a question that starts to creep into everybody's mind. That question is this it? Is this what heaven is all about? Because if this is heaven, this is starting to get kind of boring. No matter how much of a fan you are of harp music and how much you like to look at clouds and so forth, that's going to get old and boring fairly quickly. Now the point here is that we have kind of a cartoon sketch of what a lot of people's conception of what heaven is supposed to be, right? Everybody becomes like an angel, and everything is soft and fluffy and lovely music through all eternity. But that's not a very satisfactory sketch of what a meaningful life would be, because it doesn't really answer the question. If heaven simply is, in some vague sense, nice harp music and some pretty surroundings, that's not a meaningful life. Now, the point is that Twain is kind of wryly pointing to, and the existentialists will make more seriously, is that for most people, they come up to the issue of the fact that they are mortal. That's an unsettling kind of question. But their answer to it is to say, oh, well, in some way or other, the fact that I'm immortal and will go to heaven, that answers the question. But they have not thought through the issue of what heaven is supposed to be like and what will make their life in heaven worthwhile. And if you are pinning all of your hopes of a meaningful life on some sort of undefined notion of what's going to happen in the afterlife, you're not answering the question. Chances are very good that you're avoiding the question, because you know you have no clue what's going to happen in heaven, and you have, by your own admission, recognized that you haven't answered the question of what a mortal life would be, or what would make a mortal life valuable. You haven't addressed what is the central question for humans to address, namely to say, what is the meaning of life? So let's go back to the myth of Sisyphus. Right? Sisyphus is immortal, but his life, his immortal life, is not the kind of life that we would want to have. That seems more like a painful punishment. So the question then is going to be, what would make an immortal life important, valuable, meaningful, significant? We have to have an answer to that question. If we think there is the possibility of there being an immortal life, we should be addressing that question. But equally so, we have to know that the death of God is a real possibility. It might very well be that we do not have an immortal soul. It might be that we have our 70 or 80 years here, and that's it, in which case we should have a backup plan or a contingency plan. We should also have an answer to the question of what is going to make a mortal life meaningful. If it turns out there is no afterlife, there is no heaven, there is no harp playing or whatever it is, what in the here and now is going to make the next decades of my life meaningful and significant, if I can't necessarily rely on a God to give me the answer to these sorts of questions here? Now, Camus, in his reflections on the myth of Sisyphus, puts this question provocatively here, and he puts it in a kind of a negative form, and it might initially strike you as an absurd question. Camus says the most important question, the most deep philosophical question that each of us have to confront is the question of suicide. Why not commit suicide right now? Why not? Well, then you say, well, then my life would be over. But why is your life being over not problematic, or problematic, whichever way we go on that particular answer question here? If I commit suicide right now, then I'm dead, clearly, but I'm dead for billions and billions of years. I don't commit suicide now. I live for another few decades, and then I die a natural death. But then I'm dead for billions and billions of years. In big picture historical time, that difference of a few decades is not very significant. Or is it? Right? Because if I'm not going to commit suicide, then what I'm going to say is, no, those few remaining decades are significant. There is something meaningful to life that I am going to commit to over the course of these next few decades that makes it important for me not to commit suicide right now. And if you don't have an answer to that question, then why not commit suicide? That is to say, you don't have a meaning to your life. It's important for you to make that realization there. So to put the question in terms of why not commit suicide, that's of course to put it negatively, but the positive way of stating the exact same question is why live? And that's our project.